Welcome to Packet Pushers, the data networking podcast that repeatably, predictably, and reliably arrives in your podcatcher every week, in spite of the fact that it's hand-cranked, artisanally crafted, and manually published. The topic of infrastructure automation and orchestration is a tough topic to discuss. And for every single company that's out there, the whole process of introducing automation and getting to the orchestration process is just different. There's so many people, there's so many areas that can be improved. It's just a tough place to start. In today's sponsored show, we're talking with Mike Lechner from F5 Networks about his experience of Anuta NCX and how that's been helping them to deploy new services. Now, Mike is the manager of product development at F5 Networks and is part of a team that operates the cloud services that offers DDoS and web application firewalling. And that's become just a massive area of interest for enterprises for securing their internet gateways as the rise of, security has made us all think. So let's get straight into it. First of all, Mike Lechner, welcome to the show on the Packet Pushers. Thanks so much for giving us your time today.
Oh, thanks. Great to be here.
Thanks. So why don't we kick it off very briefly? Why don't you summarize what it is, this DDoS and WAF service that you're putting together for F5's customers?
Sure. As you're aware, and most of your listeners are aware, F5 traditionally has the big IPs and the load balancers, and our focus is a little bit different on the security and cloud aspect. Our department, Silverline, we offer the Silverline DDoS protection and the Silverline web application firewall. And main thing with the Silverline DDoS protection is, taking that bad, dirty traffic for our customers and scrubbing it and returning it the clean traffic to them.
So that means you've got a whole bunch of instances all around the world sucking in that DDoS traffic and doing the detection. That's the scale we're talking about.
That is correct. Data centers distributed around the globe and advertised and casted out to get as much performance we can for our customers.
And Mike, you're working with Anuta NCX to continue to roll out this product.
Yeah, correct. So we have the service that is out there today, and what we're doing is bringing Anuta in to centralize and help us orchestrate the service for our internal applications and pieces for our customer portal and other internal applications to configure the service and the pieces that are required for our customers as we onboard and make changes.
Right. So we've had Anuta on the show. Anuta Networks has been on the show a few times over the years, and we've talked to them about their platform. And mainly we focused on NCX as a tool that configures networking devices using the model-based architecture. Is that what your primary purpose is, or is there more to it than that?
Well, the first phase of it is to abstract the business logic and the actual device, like which device needs to be configured for a particular service. So we went down and took different workflows for different features and functions that we need to orchestrate our environment. And we put that into Anuta and uses Anuta as the source of truth for that configuration, data, and augmenting services. So it's like an API layer for us in our internal applications.
So it sounds to me like it's almost like the core of your platform. You've put some portals on top of it and you've done some development around it, but it's almost like it's a key part of that whole platform for you?
Yes. That's as far as the network configuration, yes, it is getting more and more there. And because what it's allowing us to do is take that kind of core functionality and logistics out of each of the applications. An example is being which switches do need to be updated? Which router configuration? Which area? We can abstract that out and put that smarts inside Anuta NCX. And then our outside applications just have to say is, hey, we need to deploy in the DC area. And then the applications don't have to care what devices or switches or routers and things that are there.
Now, Anuta NCX is a multi-vendor platform. Is that something that's useful to you? Are you really configuring lots of different devices out there?
Well, multi-vendor is definitely something you look for in a product like this. As we're building out our infrastructure, and as we built out our infrastructure, you still kind of focus in on some key players there, but they're not always the same vendor for every piece. Like our router is not necessarily the same as our switch vendor, and who knows in the future, with new technologies and things of that nature, if you need to put a different vendor back there, it's nice to know that you don't have to code for that particular vendor.
So you've got this situation where you've got a pretty substantial infrastructure. You're talking about taking a lot of load. Not only are you talking about multiple vendor, but multiple regions, but you're also talking about two areas of real concern to me, which is multi-tenancy and also scaling quickly. Now, those things that you've been able to look into and satisfy yourself with how that's going to go?
Yeah. So just to clarify one point, the service we have today is up and running. We're just bringing Anuta in to help us gear up for the future. And putting Anuta in place, what we see is, because you take some of the current applications, and let's say the way they're currently doing the device configuration, but say you have more than one application. So now who really owns that configuration? Like, are they both caching the information? As far as configuration, so the immediate impacts we could see is if we use Anuta as a source of truth, and we can roll out agents to each of the data centers that talk to the devices, it's a lot more quickly, right? Because they're local. But then instead of each application having to go to get that status, because everyone's making changes and doing things, we can just query Anuta and get that status right from there.
So then it really becomes like a key app, like it becomes like a back-end system. I imagine you've got a few other systems. This is a fairly big and complicated system, so you probably have a few different things in there, some of which are self-developed and some of which are NCX is doing for you. So why would you buy NCX instead of considering the alternatives? I mean, what other alternatives did you consider, and then why buy NCX at the end of the day?
Well, I mean, that's a great question. And, the first two pieces is, do we actually need to buy a third-party vendor, right? Can we just build this ourselves, right? Yeah. And that evaluation happened. But, orchestration is tricky, right? And so for us, we look at our department, and is that a best use of our time? And it was determined that it wasn't. So then we go out and look for vendors. And our initial choice was actually a different platform, from one of those other big vendors out there. And by the time we prioritized projects and the project and got funding and everything else for that, we found 3 other competitors to that product. So it was really in our best interest to reevaluate at that point, right? We were able to rule out the first 2 very quickly, but Anuta was different, right? And it kind of bubbled up on our radar. So then we really did some good analysis there and thought that this was the solution to go. Now, obviously being a little risky, right? Because they're not as big and not as well established there, but basically what the product was and the way that it's built and the way that it fits into our organization was great.
Right. So when you went through the process, you would have also gone through I'm sure, through the consideration of build or buy. Are you still, how much development are you doing yourself, and how much development have you saved by going straight to a pre-built platform like Anuta NCX?
So you're right. We still have to do some development, and actually that's another thing. We had to outweigh the cost. We could have went to Anuta and said, hey, professional services, here's what we want to build, and go and do it. But we decided a different approach. We really wanted to scale up on the product and learn how it works so that we can kind of control our own destiny. So that required a little more on the front end, but was definitely well worth the risk.
That leads down to the discussion where one of the big things we're talking about in modern network orchestration tools is this concept of model-driven architecture. So you have a model where you create it, and then the Yang models and the tool chain that you use to be able to handle the devices. One of the questions I always like to ask people is, did you have people problems introducing this model-driven type orchestration system?
No, and actually, Yang modeling was new to me, was new to the team. But really, when you start looking at it, it's not that tricky, right? Very similar to XML or some of the other markup languages. And what I really liked about Anuta was they provide this NDK SDK piece. And while it is an appliance and kind of a black box, the NDK really exposes you to a lot of existing models. So it's very easy to kind of, investigate and look on how things are modeled, whether it's different, service types or different objects. And so the learning curve was pretty easy with that. And then using the development kit and putting in models, it was easy to, kind of test those things out and go. But we definitely spent a lot of time on focusing and trying to get our modeling right to begin with. Because going back to the development piece, if you can get the Yang models really good, a lot of the SDK can generate a lot of the code templates and the module templates for you. That just allows you to focus on the business logic piece. So it definitely eases in development.
Did that does that shift from device-centric networking or packets through the devices or the network itself to standing back and doing the model? Has that transition been really powerful for you? Has it been simple enough to achieve, or is there would you give anybody some advice about how to approach that model-driven architecture and how to start thinking about that?
Sure. The approach that I took was more of the service type model, right? What are we trying to provide? And again, we were balancing it out of, do we want to build 1,000 different models and then have the applications piece or part together? Or do we want to build this one big monolithic model that handles all of our configuration? And we kind of settled on the middle was, well, what really defines our service? Like if you're creating a customer or you're adding a customer endpoint or things of that nature. So abstracting the actual device stuff out and just providing these like API calls, and then the way that you put them out on dependencies, then you can actually hook service models to each to make sure that there are dependencies where your applications don't have to worry, right? You can tell them, here's the order, but if they choose not to do it, we can still check it inside the service model pieces there. And so that's the approach that we took, but more of this, what service are we providing? And we look at, all of our internal teams as customers. And so it's like, what's going to make it easy for them? How can we sell it to them to use this product? So we try to make it as easy as possible.
So a lot of other people have talked to us about, using Puppet and Ansible to do their configuration and to do their automation of the network configuration. But it sounds to me from the way you're looking at it, you're actually saying, I'm configuring an entire service. And if you had have actually gotten down into this, writing code like Python for Puppet and Ansible and doing this device, you might not have actually got to your service problem. Like just from the way you talk, you're just focused on the business aspects.
Correct. So you're right. You could spend a lot of time in doing this, but it's like someone has to do that business logic, whether it's the outside application or where we chose to put it inside the Anuta piece there to make it easy and friendly to use for these other applications, just and really extracting as much of the topology in the network as possible, and using like a Puppet or an Ansible, sure, you can configure the device, but you still have to be aware of the devices and all of the things that go along or which steps to take. And that's where we kind of try to abstract that out in this orchestration, right? Because to me, Puppet and Ansible are more of, how do I configure this switch or, server or something like that? It just stops the repetitive tasks. Where orchestration, I'm saying, hey, I want to add widget A. Who needs to know anything about widget A? And that's where Anuta comes in for us.
So when you're building out these models, is this a kind of a cross-organizational effort, or is it just, I need the networking group for this and then the application group for that? Or does everybody get at the table the first time around and say, okay, let's talk this whole thing through?
So my approach was, again, looking at all the different teams as customers, right? And some customers in this case are a little more, priority than others, right? So I really looked at the network team as being priority A customer because they're the devices, right? They're the ones that are getting called in the middle of the night if there's problems and those type of pieces. So I really focused on them first. And it was good because I'm not a network engineer by trade, but I do know enough to be dangerous. So
that's kind of knowledge.
Yeah. And talking with our network engineering team. So what I had to do was kind of get a feel for, they have what needs to be configured and why, but I have a unique perspective because I'm not a network engineer. Yeah. So, and working with the network team, I had a different perspective where, I'm not sure how all the pieces fit together. So I ask different questions and things to look at it from that service way and build it out and try to map out dependencies and stuff. And that's what was really key for us and how we determined what service models to build. Because, you're looking at things like, well, if I delete this piece, I want to make sure I don't delete other core pieces that things are responsible for, right? That are hooked into other models. So we kind of looked at all of those dependencies and things like that and kind of really crafted out, this is a service and that's a service. And it's really easy to look at this service model here for a dependency, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think so. I think what you're saying, if I turn that into nerd speak, if I can have a go at it, is
Sure.
You've kind of got this Anuta, you've got the NCX platform, and it's got all of these models, and it's got its northbound APIs and its southbound APIs, and you've got all of the models and the pieces in there. And because it sees everything as a yang, and just basically you say, go and do this to that device, and it just goes off and does it for you. So all of a sudden you're not sitting there thinking to yourself, if I get in the car, I've got to turn the engine on, and then the pistons have to work, and then the fuel has to pump, blah blah blah, and all that. And that's pretty much what you're doing when you use manual automation like Ansible and Puppet. You've got to think about an awful lot of those steps yourself. But Anuta kind of takes that away from you, because you just have to say, oh, I've got a Cisco device or a Juniper device or an F5 device, whatever it is in the network, there's a Yang model for it. If I want to do this to it, it just self-generates the code for you and goes off and does it. And kind of that leaves you free to start thinking about, well, if I did this and put this in, then I could run this service flow. Am I reading that right?
Yeah, absolutely, because the focus is not on what commands do I have to run on the device. It's like, what are my rules for actually doing this configuration? So example is like, you go to add a customer. What's the first step? Well, the VLAN for our customer needs to be populated on all of the devices in the network, all the edge, let's say. And so if our portal team adds a new, or a portal application adds a new customer, it says add customer XYZ, and then it doesn't know what devices, it doesn't know what data centers. It just knows at that point, the VLAN is everywhere it needs to be, or whatever, in every other step. Mm-hmm. But from my layer, and using the SDK, I can say, well, here are all the devices that we do configuration. Hey, it's a level or a layer 3 interface, and we add this VLAN on, and by magic, the VLAN gets added in all the right places.
See, and this to me is the shift, right? This is the shift away from doing something at the CLI where the human had to translate the business intent into, arcane mystic code that came out of their fingers in some command line, to moving towards the first step of automation, which is Ansible and Puppet, which is actually all a lot of people can actually manage to achieve, because you can only make small incremental changes. But if you can start to imagine an orchestration system like NCX, which has, the portal and the models and does a lot of that work for you, it seems to me that you just automatically stand right the way back from the actual network itself, and you're really focused on, just getting the region set up. The tenancies are already configured. This thing happens, that thing happens. You can do configuration checks and validations and dependency checks to make sure that things, because that's all taken care of for you in the NCX platform.
Yeah, and yes, and it's actually making the network and the devices like another application, right? And it's putting that API there that other people can go with, but doesn't have to worry about, do I SSH and CLI these commands? VLAN add. It's just add it, right. and it's all abstracted.
It's all abstracted. So I wanted to just ask some questions about the Anuta solution itself. As we were chatting before we came online, we talked a little bit about the role-based access control model and the IPAM. Was there something about NCX that really caught your eye or your attention there?
Yeah, so one of the things with the role-based access is, in using, obviously you can set up users and permissions for the UI itself, but the access controls are very flexible. And so when you're designing your APIs and exposing them, you can apply the same model to those APIs as well. So, making a set of read-only calls or read-write calls and those things based off of the service models that we developed ourselves. It's super configurable in that way, and everything from the product itself is basically like a layer of APIs, and you're able to control any portion of the roles and access and stuff for any portion of the product.
So I think that's important, because you're building a multi-tenant system that's going to be administered by a central party. You really need to know that system's right out there. So it's going to integrate into other pieces for your particular situation, and it's going to be flexible enough to be what you want. What about IP addressing? Are you managing that from within NCX too?
Today we're not. So the first phase that we worked on was putting this, for lack of a better term, I'll put the abstraction layer, right? Building NCX as that for the applications. But you're right. At that point, if we have one application here that's managing our IP addresses or even our VLAN pools for there, it's like, well, why do that, right? And so our second phase is to abstract that away from our customer too. So if our portal says, hey, we're going to create this customer and that requires a unique VLAN, why do they have to send it in? We'll just do it for them. And so those pieces with IPAM, VLAN pools, and those pieces, again, put those in control of Anuta and just so the applications don't have to worry.
We're getting towards the end here, so I want to sort of wrap this up a little bit. Now, if you were talking to somebody who is going to take on an NCX platform and an orchestration project along the lines of what you've just talked about here, have you got some lessons that you've learned maybe you'd like to pass on to someone who's getting into this space?
Sure. The very first lesson I'd say is the network orchestration is not easy. And so if you choose to go at it on your own, be prepared. But then after that, really focus on, take the time to really look at, what you're trying to build and design. Again, we took the service model approach in what we're providing as a service. So it really takes a lot to take that time up front and in defining your Yang models for your services, breaking out like what your services are and the dependencies. And once you have a clear vision there, it makes then development much more quickly. But that's almost like any project you're going to undertake, right? The initial planning really saves a lot in the long run.
Well, I think the challenge with orchestration is there's too many choices. Yeah. And in the sense that you could take it in many different directions, you could model services in different ways. And then a lot of these modeling systems allow you to do things that you've never done before. And all of a sudden you start thinking, well, I could do this and I could do this. And there's too much flexibility. And suddenly you get lost in what was I trying to achieve rather than actually this is what I'm doing sort of thing.
Sure. And that's why, your goals in advance of what you're, what are we trying to solve here? What problem am I trying to solve is definitely keep the focus on that. And we try to do an iterative approach, solve the problems and, this would be cool to investigate, right? And so can we do this? Can we do this other feature? And so definitely add it, but, stay focused on your core.
Right. So the thing I find interesting about your NCX deployment is that it's very distributed. You've got multiple data centers, multiple sites. You're very customized in the sense that you're scaling across lots of different hardware devices in the southbound, but the services you're building on the top are reasonably diverse as well. How have you found, and now this is going to be like a kicker question. I know what you're going to say, but how have you found working with Anuta? Because this could be a really difficult thing. There's an awful lot of elasticity in there. And when you've got a vendor who sort of, here's your product, lets you on your lane, that's not what you need.
Again, when we looked, we knew we had two things. Like if we just wanted a product and we wanted something, to work tomorrow, we know that and working with Anuta, we could utilize professional services and we can get what we wanted. But that doesn't work in an on-call arena where I'm getting called at 3 a.m. and I'm not sure how it works. So it's like, oh, wait, I've got to call my vendor. So we made the choice of taking the investment and learning the platform. Now, the thing that I loved about the platform is, even though it's an appliance and a delivered in a VM, in somewhat of a black box, it's still really open, especially with the SDK, the NDK they call it, and so with that, not only is it pretty much an open book at that point as far as configuration and how things work, but you still have the ability to expand on devices. Let's say maybe a fully feature or command set was not fully supported right now at this moment. I can go ahead and fix that and I can expand it myself on top of the product that's delivered. And then if it's something really useful, I can feed it back to Anuta and they can include it for everyone. Or if there's not a device that they don't, say we have our own device and it's not supported by Anuta, I can actually write the templates and things to support that device as well. So we've got a lot of flexibility there. And, spending the time and learning the platform and the product will really reap benefits for moving forward in the things we want to do. We don't have to rely on anyone else to move our agenda forward.
Well, Mike, I think that's just about it for today. I don't think I've got any more questions to ask you. So thanks very much for your time. I really appreciate it. Have you got anywhere on the internet where people can find you? Have you got through your blog or your social at all?
Well, just outside of Twitter and LinkedIn, you can find me Lechner on Twitter or Michael Lechner on LinkedIn, but not anything with blogs or anything like that.
Well, Mike, thanks so much for joining us today. And thanks to Anuta Networks for sponsoring today's show and talking a little bit with their customers about what they're doing on the NCX platform. Now, you can find this and many more fine free technical podcasts along with our community blog at packetpushers.net. You can follow the Packet Pushers on Twitter as @PacketPushers. Find us on LinkedIn, like us on Facebook, rate us on iTunes, and a range of other fine activities. And last but not least, remember that too much technology would never be enough.